and the occupation of 2 neighboring states and the massacres of their people, is in jail now and will follow Slobodan Milosevic and Augusto Pinochet into the dock quite soon. I know there are some people here who don't take delight in this, but I will say that I do, that it's a long overdue justice, a long overdue act of justice and mercy. A constitution, a federal democratic constitution, is being debated now as we speak with the printing of 5 million copies of a provisional document, debated on 6 television channels, 6, and perhaps as many as 100 newspapers, in a country where 3 years ago it was death, not just for you but for your family, to possess a satellite dish or to attempt to distribute a leaflet. Death for you and your family, and not a quick one either. Does anyone not agree that this is a night and day difference? I invite them to say if they don't. The largest stateless minority in the Middle East, the people of Kurdistan, in other words, who have suffered many years of oppression and exile and occupation in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and in Lebanon and in Turkey, have begun to scramble, so to say, to their feet to assume something like their full height as a people. Even before the intervention, they were producing an autonomy, a democracy, a self-determination of their own in the provinces of northern Iraq, which, when I saw them last, were a landscape of desolation and depravity. You could still smell the poison gas, you could still smell the mass graves, the ruined cities, the burned hillsides, the women who had chemical burns that still burn after years. Out of this, the Kurds have begun to build and help other Iraqis build when they could have been chauvinistic. They could have been xenophobic. They could have said, enough with Iraq. We're through with it. We're leaving. Instead, accepted their internationalist responsibilities. President Talabani, it seems to me, is a president of whom any country in the region could be proud, and not just by the sort of comparisons one could make. This is an extraordinary, unarguable, unambiguous gain. The disarmament of Libya, capitulation of Colonel Gaddafi, his abandonment of his covert arsenal of weapons of mass destruction, and the walking back of the evidence that he gave us, because we all have it now, thank you, sir, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which I think is the right place for it, on analysis was able to disclose to us that the provenance of much of this illegal weaponry was the AQ Khan network in Pakistan, a kind of Walmart for WMD, nukes are us, with a line stretching all the way from North Korea to the Iraqi envoys who, in March 2003, as the coalition was preparing to intervene, were negotiating in Damascus with the envoys of Kim Jong-il to buy North Korean missiles off the shelf. And people say Iraq and WMD can't be mentioned in the same breath. Now, not everything about this can be attributed to the intervention, but it's noticeable, I think, that Colonel Gaddafi did not, when he wanted to capitulate, go to Mr. Kofi Annan, for example, or that great statesman, Mr. Jacques Chirac, a man so corrupt, as said of Mr. D'Alembert, I think, in Sentimental Education, so corrupt he would willingly have paid for the pleasure of selling himself. Nor to Gerhard Schroeder, the rump figure of what was once a proud German social democracy. No, he came to Mr. Blair and to Mr. Bush and says, I'm out of this game now, and you can analyze everything I've got. That's not nothing, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a step towards disarmament and non-proliferation into the bargain. And then the spread, no less important, of the democratic impulse within the region. Not only is this being spread by the vector of the Kurdish people and their revolution, because as you will be readily able to find if you haven't read of it already, there have been demonstrations in Qamishli, the Kurdish main city in northern Syria, among the oppressed Kurds who suffer under the ossified theocracy of Iran, and of course in Turkey as well, to pick up the message that yes, liberation is at hand. These demonstrations broke out on the day that President Talabani was sworn in as president of Iraq. There's an unmistakable connection between them. We who have been friends of the Kurds are very proud of their achievement, and we intend to stand by them no matter what. I will add that the moral leader of the Egyptian democracy movement, the man who has begun to break open the argument in Egypt, and who suffered a long period of imprisonment during this time and was written to by Nelson Mandela as Egypt's equivalent, has told me, and for quotation, that in his opinion, this new mood in the region would be unthinkable if it was not for the removal of the single worst tyrant who is present there. That's not nothing, as in point of testimony. That's from deep within the bowels of the Egyptian prison system, the man who is the moral hero of the democracy movement. He says, and I agree with him, and he's echoed by Anwar Ibrahim as far away as Malaysia, who is the Malay equivalent, and by the leader of the Socialist Party of Lebanon, Mr. Jumblat, have all stated publicly that this for them is the beginning of the end, the fall of the wall, as they put it. This, I think, is also something to take pride in. Now, I could have said this in front of any audience and against any antagonist, but in my last 2 minutes, I will have to say that I believe it is a disgrace that a member of the British House of Commons should go before the United States Senate subcommittee and not testify, but decline to testify, and to insult all those who try to ask him questions with the most vile and cheap gutter snipe abuse. I think that's a disgrace. And I've got 1 minute. I've got 1 minute. And it is worse than a disgrace. That's not coming out of my time. If you knew how you looked and sounded, comrades, when you do that, well, the cameras can take care of it. That's not coming out of my time. It is not just a disgrace, it is a crime that Mr. Gaddafi has profited from the theft of money from the Iraqi oil for food program, has told continuous lies about his profiteering from it and the foul associates that he made, at a time when Iraqi children were dying, and 11 billion from this program, 11 billion, went to the murderer and criminal and sadist and fanatic Saddam Hussein. How can anyone who's a business partner of this regime show their face in a city like this and not content with it? Not content with it. Not content with it. He turns up in Damascus. The man's search for a tyrannical fatherland never ends. The Soviet Union's let him down. Albania's gone. The Red Army's out of Afghanistan and Czechoslovakia. The hunt persists. Saddam has been overthrown, and his criminal connections with him have been exposed. But on to the next. On the 30th of July, in Damascus in Syria, appearing, I've given it all to you in a piece of paper, in front of Mr. Assad, whose death squads are cutting down the leaders of democracy in Lebanon, as this is going on, to tell the Syrian people they're fortunate to have such a leader. The slobbering Dauphin, who they got because he's the son of the slobbering tyrant who came before him. How anyone with a tincture of socialist principle can act or speak in this way is beyond me, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, far beyond you and far beneath your contempt. Thank you.
George Galloway, your response.
Well, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, slobbering was the note that Mr. Hitchens chose to end on. I'm not sure that was wise.
Bring it on.
But I want to begin by praising Mr. Hitchens. In Dundee, my home city, at the annual delegate meeting of the National Union of Journalists 25 years ago, the same Mr. Hitchens made a speech in which he praised me and the City Council for what he described as its brave act of twinning the city of Dundee with the Palestinian city of Nablus. He said...
No. Must have been someone else.
He said that it was, I didn't interrupt you, so perhaps you'll not slobber over my remarks.
Someone else.
You see, it was very important, Mr. Hitchens' support for the Palestinian people, and it was not easy in 1980. Only a few years before, the Palestinian resistance had seized the Israeli Olympic Games team in Munich,